You know, there's some house plants that no matter what you do, they're still going to look sickly, never bloom, or many of them just outright die.
I think that's called a brown thumb,
Yeah.
huh? Well, the African violet is one of those rare house plants that really is pretty easy to look after and one that'll bloom continuously. Our 5-minute gardener, Debbie Mounts from Harlow Gardens, tells us it's about light, watering, and fertilizing. One of the favorites, I think, for a lot of people are African violets, but they also hold their mystery. People don't know quite how to take care of them. Help us out.
Yeah, they have. Well, I can give you some good basic tips on African violets. The first thing you want to know is they need about 12 hours of light. But they don't want, you always hear that they like a northern window or an eastern window, and that's really true, but generally they want even that light to be slightly diffused. Like if you have a sheer curtain or shutters that are barely open or something like that. But they do need at least 12 hours of light. They also need, the interesting part, they need about 8 hours of darkness, because that's the time that they pull the fertilizer into them and utilize that fertilizer that you're providing for them. So that's the other trick to it, is make sure they get that darkness too. The other thing you want to know about is fertilizing. They want to have a good, there are African violet fertilizers. We recommend that you purchase an African violet fertilizer. And the information that I read said that you want to use it lightly but constantly.
Right.
It wants to be constantly fed but only lightly fed. So be sure and give it food. Otherwise, they start to lose their leaf color, they don't flower as much, they just don't look as good if you don't do that. Then we're going to talk about watering. When you water, you don't want to get moisture on the leaves of the violet. That's why you always hear about African violets wanting to be watered from the bottom. So the pots that I have here, I'm going to show you. These are now these are planted in a little plastic pot, which is fine. You can water and put the water in the soil, just don't get it on the leaves. But you can also buy a pot like this, which is a self-watering pot. What happens is you plant the violet in this piece, the water goes in here, and this is absorbent and absorbs right through the pot and keeps it evenly moist. It works really well. Okay.
All right, from the magic of videotape to live and in person in the studio, Debbie, you got more information on these beautiful plants. How much bigger will they get?
Well, they can get pretty big. Some of the violets, I've seen violets that, you know, that are about like this, especially people that are real violet aficionados. And what I decided to do is show you how easy it is to start a new violet, which is an interesting way to do it. You start it from a leaf. So I brought a little bit of soil. I also brought my cheaters here so I can see what I'm doing. Exactly. So what you do is you take scissors and you just cut a leaf out, cut it on a diagonal, and then you take and you cut up the stem of the violet, splitting it. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to plant it in this soil. I'm going to use this tip of my scissors.
Well, before you go in there, if we can get a close-up of that split once again.
Sure.
I think this camera right here to your right, if you can just show.
Yeah, just cut it right in half.
Right in half, okay.
Exactly. Can you see that?
Thanks, Debbie.
There you go, sure. And then this is just going to go right down in this soil, just barely in the soil, and putting it around it. Now, this soil is not wet, so that's not going to help. It's not going to stand up very well. But this is another one of the African violet pots. So we're going to assume this little guy's going to stand up because the soil's wet. And I'm going to put the water, and the fertilizer just goes right down in here.
Perfect.
And then the little pot just sits right on the inside of that.
And how long will it take for it to take root?
Well, it'll take probably within a month it should be rooted out. And this is going to start to draw the moisture up in there. And I'll keep pushing him down. And
if that soil were wet, it would stand up
Exactly.
better.
And I could put a little water on the surface here to hold it up. But this is how you start a new African violet, which is pretty amazing. The other thing I didn't talk about on tape that I forgot to tell you is one of the things with African violets is they like to have tight shoes. They don't want to have a lot of extra soil volume around them. So growing them in small pots is perfectly appropriate. That's where they're happiest. You don't graduate them into a bigger pot until that pot is pretty filled with roots.
You were also telling me that it's a good idea to periodically take off leaves from underneath here.
Exactly. Within a month's period, you want to take off 2 to 3 leaves from the bottom, and that's going to promote new growth